The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Thanks for joining us here today. We're so excited to present you this webinar on building a modern nurture stream to drive real-world results. I'm Daniel Gaugler, CMO at PFL. PFL is a marketing technology company that helps marketers cut through the digital clutter by delivering impactful and meaningful messages with tactile marketing automation, aka direct mail. And we do this by integrating with the systems tools you already use, from your marketing automation platforms to your CRM. It makes sending anything from a postcard to a dimensional kit and to a multi-pieces personalized and timely as digital marketing. I'm really excited for our guests that we have today. First, I have Lauren Mead, CMO of Timetrade. Lauren is responsible for Timetrade's marketing strategy and execution, including branding, messaging, demand generation, digital and product marketing, and public relations. That's a whole lot. So thanks, Lauren, for taking some time to do this webinar. She joined the company in 2016 with more than 10 years of B2B technology marketing experience. Prior to Timetrade, Lauren was a senior director of marketing at Click Software. She earned a bachelor's degree in marketing from Burmack College and an MBA in marketing from Bentley University. So thanks so much, Lauren, for joining us and being a PFL customer and willing to share your story with all the marketers here today. Also joining us today is Cheri Keith, Senior Research Analyst at SiriusDecisions in the demand marketing practice, where she advises clients on marketing strategies and technologies and services. So today, to kick it off, we're going to have Cheri start us off and really share with us a framework of what building a modern nurture stream looks like. And then Lauren will jump in and tell us how she's executing that in the real world. Cheri?
Great. Thank you, Daniel. So as we mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how this idea of traditional nurture actually ignores the reality of how buyers are making decisions today, how they're working together as part of teams or buying groups, and really the different nuances that individuals have when they're involved. And this is all really based on a lot of the homework that we need to do as demand marketers or working with our friends in industry marketing to understand personas and the different stages of the buyer's journey. And oftentimes what we see in companies is that nurture lacks clear programming. It lacks objectives and goals. It's really been put into this mode of set it and forget it and has been left to be forgotten. And I think the other problem is that with linear nurture programs, they're really focused on this idea of controlling an individual with each interaction and assuming that people want to take the steps that we wish for them to take. And this really lacks the context of what's going on in an individual's world, what's going on within an account, and the other signals that they actually could be putting out into the market. So you'll leave today's session with an understanding of how to rethink nurture. You'll get an approach, as Daniel mentioned, to understand how to create these buying interactions and design a better nurture program based on this. And also you're going to get that real life example from Timetrade. So from a nurture program perspective, demand units really have become like a magic decoder ring for us. They help us to connect the dots around who is part of the buying group, what solution they need, which is important since so many organizations have more than one product that they bring to market. And this also brings awareness into the entire process so that sales and marketing can actually be aligned about what's going on. And we really need to accept the reality of buyers' needs and these purchasing dynamics to build nurture programs that can actually support a buyer-led experience. Now, we should all be honest. We've been told for years that we cannot control the buyer. Yet, you know what happens when we keep trying to do that, but we actually don't make any changes in order to address this. So what we really need to do is understand the buying group construct that goes beyond the individual. While we're marketing oftentimes one-to-one, we need to take into account that there are other dynamics and other people that are involved. But we also need to understand about how this fits in with the needs of that buying group and how our solution might play in here. And we bring these two things together, and what we're left with is that demand unit that I mentioned earlier, so that we can better engage with an account and understand more about what those needs are. Now, to be honest, we wouldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago. But today's data, process, and technology enhancements have really changed our ability to understand the buyer, understand the dynamics of the buying group, and understand what a company's needs are based on the different signals that they may be putting into market, or the different signals that are happening in the market as a result of things like mergers and acquisitions, or even things that happen at an industry or government level when it comes to different compliance regulations. So if we put this all together, this idea of advanced capabilities that we didn't have several years ago, along with understanding more about our buying group context, what we end up with is how we're actually able to operationalize what we have in front of us today. So with these advanced capabilities, like I mentioned, we have signals to understand with who and how to engage with them. We also have this idea of, based on those needs, what our response should be. So understanding the buyer context shows us how and when we need to respond. And finally, based on those signals and then the responses, that determines the next best action as marketers or as sales that we end up taking. Now, demand marketers have access to the data and process and technology that can really help you consider both the account, the buying group, and the individual within this construct when it comes to the planning and designing of programs that work off of this idea of signal, response, and action. So what we're going to do now is to jump into a little bit more detail on each of these so that we can consider this in a different way. But we'll first start by considering how this plays into the demand unit waterfall. So this is a construct that SiriusDecisions released a few years ago. And the core of this is really understanding that while individuals are going through the waterfall, it's really based on that team moving through the waterfall together and this buying group. And we always need to make sure that as we think about the different stages of the demand unit waterfall, that it's also aligned to demand program objectives, which are activating new demand, so new logo creation, validating demand, so making sure that you understand who's part of the buying group and how you can market to them. And finally, acceleration of demand would be another demand program objective. So this is where we're actually have someone who's interested, they're in our pipeline, and we're doing programs to help accelerate them through. And so if we bring that together with signal, response, and action, we're able to think about it in this way. So we have our activate, validate, and accelerate programming, all against signal, response, and action. So if we think about our signals, we want to be listening at an account level, at a group level, and at an individual level. And when you're doing those listening to signals, I think what's most important is to understand that this is also where you're determining your target account list. Based on the data that you have access to and ideal company profiles, you're able to have a good look into this. But this is also where you're able to understand more about intent data. And predictive analytics has certainly played a role here as well. And this is where we're thinking about things like understanding when someone is putting out signals very explicitly about what they're looking for, potentially from a provider, or this could also take the shape of a firmographic signal, for example. So this could be an acquisition or a merger, or perhaps a change in CFO, for example, would be a signal to your company that a client of yours is ready to buy. When we think about response, this is really about offer and the delivery mechanism in order to do this. So this is making sure that you're aligning these offers that we're talking about to the different buying group members. Your offer needs to be very different and tailored if you're marketing to a CIO versus a manager. But you will also want to make sure that you're actually delivering these offers through preferred methods. So this is where interlock with your portfolio marketing or industry marketing is so important to make sure that you're designing these programs against persona preferences. And finally, when we're thinking about the action, so this is really about understanding the signals and then the responses, and then making sure that we're able to understand those and act based on that behavior with different scoring or different routing mechanisms. And this can only be done if you're actually tracking actions and behaviors within systems. This isn't something that can be done manually. But you also want to make sure that you're continually adjusting your scoring models based on behaviors and demographics, and also that you figure out when you might need to update your program transition. So understanding when you would pass to sales and what the different thresholds might be. So if we have this built out here, and I know this is a NIDE chart, but what this takes into account is understanding that signals are very different depending on which of the program objectives you're working against. So what we see in our activate, these are questions that we have that are very different than what we have. So you would want to use all of this as a way to better understand your buyers and making sure that you're designing nurture programs that aren't just set it and forget it, but ones that are continually optimized and being addressed, and thinking about how you use these questions as a way to develop your buyer treatment plan around signal, response, and action. And I think the last thing I would mention here is that while this is a framework and a treatment plan with a lot of great questions in here that help with some of that soul searching that we all need to do as marketers, we do see companies customizing this in order to get the most from it. And you're certainly going to hear from Lauren at Timetrade with their success stories, but I do want to leave you with this idea that this is a great starting plan, and customize it as you need so that you can find your own successes.
Great, thank you, Cheri. That was an awesome overview of the waterfall and how we can use signals to really understand when and how we can orchestrate our marketing and activate that data to have interactions. Lauren was going to jump in now and share with us how they are applying the demand waterfall in real life and making this happen. Lauren?
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Cheri. So just to give you guys a little context before I jump into our campaigns about who Timetrade is, so you understand kind of the companies and the buyers that we're selling to. So what Timetrade does is we solve the problem that most of you have probably faced along the lines of scheduling meetings with people outside of your company, and really the problems that come along with that. So if you have multiple people, how do you find that mutually agreeable time, all the back and forth to get that time that really results in a lot of wasted time and frustration. And we do that through intelligent appointment scheduling, which basically helps our customers schedule appointments with their customers and engage with them better throughout the entire customer journey. Timetrade's customers span both B2B as well as B2C brands, many of whom I'm sure you recognize here. We sell to over 500 enterprise brands, 30,000 businesses when you consider some of the small and medium businesses we work with. We've scheduled over 500 million appointments on our platform to date. So back in early 2018, Timetrade decided to change our marketing strategy to leverage an ABM model. And the reason we really decided to go along with this was focus and alignment. So the problem that we face, which is a good problem to have actually, is that anybody that has customers that they want to meet with could potentially be a fit for Timetrade. And one of the problems that it resulted for us as a company was that we were stretching ourselves a little bit too thin in terms of trying to be everything to everyone. And so this is where we decided to leverage ABM to really focus on alignment. When we talk about alignment, this was in a lot of different areas. So what accounts were we going to go after? What's the pitch and what do those customers really want? How is marketing and the BDR team going to be going after that? What roles does every individual play in this process? What do we mean when we talk about a qualified opportunity? What do we want as an organization? And what are the handoff points in terms of who's engaging with accounts when? And to really come up with our ABM strategy, we brought together a cross-functional team that spanned everywhere from individual BDRs all the way up to the executive team of the company. And the goal here was we looked at both, data. We pulled information out of Salesforce in terms of where are we winning, where are we not winning as much as we want, what are the deals that are most profitable for Timetrade, and then as well anecdotal information from our teams about deals that they've worked. And what we really wanted to drill into and narrow down into is what are the vertical markets where we're being most successful? What are the size companies that we really want to be going after? What are the different use cases or personas that we're going after? And then who are the stakeholders in terms of the buying group that we want to be targeting within these campaigns? And as an output of that exercise, we really kind of broke our market into 3 major categories. So when you start at the bottom of this period, that's really anybody. This is our total addressable market, anybody that had a need for scheduling, and where we're not going to spend a ton of sales and marketing time on these particular accounts outbound, we certainly would work with them if they came to us inbound. The next year, we deemed our target accounts, and we came up with about 10,000 accounts that met this criteria. And these are ones that we're going to do one-to-many accounts. One-to-many marketing and really give them an industry-specific marketing approach. And then a subset of that 10,000, we picked 400 named accounts that sales and marketing chose together, where we were really going to do a specific ABM, one-to-one type of marketing. As you can see on the left of that pyramid, really where they fell in this kind of determined our strategy and the investment that we put into individual accounts. Once we had those accounts identified, those companies, then we went in and really made sure we identified who are all the key personas and the people at those accounts and populated our database so sales and marketing was well equipped to go after those companies. And as you can see in this chart here, where you fell in the pyramid, you know, the top row being that top of the pyramid, they were getting the most of our time and our budget, whereas you go down the pyramid, they were getting a little bit less attention, really to make sure we're focusing our efforts on the accounts that had the highest ROI. So when you look at the nurture campaigns that we ran into on these particular accounts, you know, we figured out who are the accounts that we wanted to. We identified the buying group and the people within those buying groups that we wanted to go after. We had figured out the relevant personalized communications that they wanted to hear and the value prop and what it was for them. And what we were really struggling with when it came to nurture was like actually getting through to those people and having them, you know, receive our message. You know, getting that in front of them and making sure they're ready to engage with our content and getting their attention. As many of you, when you look back a few years ago, our marketing strategy was a little bit too heavily weighted towards email, which is something I think a lot of marketers are struggling with finding effectiveness today. I think email definitely has to be part of any nurture strategy, but it can't be the whole nurture strategy. And actually what kind of brought about adding direct mail into our mix is we were targeted by a different company with a direct mail piece, and it really caught our attention and got us talking about that company. And we said, how can we work this into our programs? This is a picture of our very first direct mail campaign. It's a little embarrassing to put this up here, I think, because it's not the prettiest. You know, as a marketer, we're always looking for beautiful campaigns, I think. So, you know, what we had in terms of this very first campaign, because when we started out with direct mail, we were doing it all in-house. We had interns in our house over the summer. We were ordering all the materials, buying boxes. Our admins were shipping them out and doing all that. And it was a really manual process. So even though we, you know, were getting attention and starting to see the results that we liked, they weren't as personalized and polished as we wanted. It took a lot of time to get them out the door, which was leading to scalability issues and also measurement. And, you know, once we kind of figured out the ROI from these campaigns and realized it's working, we determined this was something we wanted to look into a little bit further and figure out how we could scale this. And I think this is like a real picture of one of our interns, you know, over that summer, because they were literally inundated with boxes, and our admin was like continuously checking our FedEx account so she could notify the BDRs and sales team when their packages were being delivered so they could follow up timely. And it just really wasn't working for us. And that's where PFL came into the picture for Timetrade. So we use them to help us scale our marketing direct-to-mail and nurture programs. And I'll talk a little bit about a few examples where we incorporated those into our nurture campaigns today. So looking at the campaigns, as you heard Cheri mention earlier, there's kind of 3 program objectives that you can get out of nurture. So I'll share with you one example in each of those categories of different campaigns that we've run. So this was the very first campaign we ran with PFL. I hope you think this looks a lot nicer. I'm sure I do. This particular campaign was targeted for software and technology companies, specifically towards salespeople. So the personas that we identified for this campaign, it was the head of sales, who we found was traditionally the person who is identifying some of the pain points on the sales organization and helping develop the sales strategy and what areas they would focus on. And then a sales operations or potentially a sales enablement type of person who is actually the one who is responsible for going out, identifying the technology tools that would solve those initiatives, and then hopefully selecting a vendor that would do it. So for this particular campaign, we knew we had to reach both of those individuals within the buying group. So we actually had two different pieces within the campaign that targeted those individuals. So what we did is we sent the head of sales a putting mat with specific messaging and a personalized note. And then the sales operations person received a box as well with a personalized note and the golf balls. And the messaging within that campaign was driving those two individuals to talk to one another and have a conversation about time trade. We call this particular campaign internally, we call it a meeting maker, because really our goal was to get a meeting with one or both of those individuals, and that was really what a lot of the messaging drove. But I think one thing that we really liked about this campaign and helped validate the success of it was that even if they weren't willing to take a meeting, the materials that we chose, as I think in a lot of cases, we have a big time trade putting mat in the middle of a sales floor of a company. So even if they weren't willing to take that meeting and engage with us right away, we were getting our brand out there and hopefully creating conversations on the sales floor about time trade. The great thing about this campaign is now that we were live with PFL, the sales team and the BDRs had a lot more access to personalize the materials and activate them at the time that was most relevant and automatically get the tracking information when those pieces were delivered. And for us, one of the things that we saw was really critical. I talked about earlier that admin continuously having to check to see when the packages were delivered, but being really timely in our follow-up was critical to the success. So we knew the second that somebody signed for that package, and then we were able to, follow up and nurture that person with email messages, BDR follow-ups, and leverage our own technology to hopefully get the meeting. This is a real email that we received from a prospect, and I'm glad to say it wasn't the only one in terms of great feedback we got. But it was really successful for us in terms of getting meetings with prospects, and we actually saw about 25% of the companies that we mailed to with this campaign actually converted to sales opportunities. So the next campaign I'm going to talk about really falls, I think, into the validate stage in terms of program objectives. This is one we ran late last year. It was targeted at retail and banking executives who are hosting events and classes within their locations across a variety of different store locations. This was a new product launch for us. And the mail piece was a video card. So when you opened up that bright blue card, it actually played a live video that we created around the launch of that particular product line. What was different about this one is that, where in the first direct mail I showed with that golf kit, that was really the first piece. And when we touched the prospect, this one we leveraged a much more of a multi-channel approach. And we actually only triggered the direct mail once we had some initial engagement from those different people. So we leveraged a lot more different channels and signals to help us identify who would receive those packages. Really, the big kickoff to this program was digital advertising, and we did this specific with ADM, so leveraging LinkedIn as well as ad roll. We targeted ads to several different personas within the buying group at companies as well as those companies, and we could really target who was receiving that messaging. And then we used that information from the results of those to determine who would move forward with the campaign. This is a quick timeline of some of the touches we had. So we first off, marketing owned, really being strategic about selecting the people that would go into that campaign. We kicked off with digital campaigns as well as email campaigns. And then we didn't actually trigger the direct mail piece almost till week 5. And those direct mail packages were only triggered for people who had actually engaged in some of the digital information. And we actually learned in some cases, even though we did a lot of research, like that person was no longer at the company, or we weren't able to get any traction with them. And so we didn't use those more expensive pieces to further that engagement with that particular prospect. And then the last campaign I'll share with you, I think, falls into the accelerate stage. And actually, I don't have a ton to share on this one because we literally just launched it last week. But the goal of this program was really to have marketing help support sales in more deal acceleration and working with existing opportunities. So we really wanted to make more of an impression on accounts after we had delivered a sales proposal. So we allow the sales team to automatically trigger these kits through Salesforce using PFL. And each kit contains, you know, a little bit of fun stuff, some mugs and Stroop waffles, but also some really great content in terms of that's focused on the selection process, some case studies that are personalized for their specific use case or industry, and a handwritten note from the account executive, really giving them some more tools to kind of circulate and advocate for Timetrade within their organization. So overall, you know, results definitely vary by campaign, and each of these campaigns, as you can see, kind of has a different goal. But overall, what we see out of direct mail is that we have about a 25% conversion rate from scent to opportunity. That first campaign that I shared with you, the golf campaign, where it was really focused on initial pipeline generation, we saw that we were able to generate 7 times the value or the cost of the campaign in active pipeline, and we've already closed 2 times the cost of the campaign in terms of deals, and we have a lot more still in the pipeline now because of just the average deal cycle that we have. And that's really just looking at the first year of SaaS revenue. So when you look at the total lifetime value of those customers, the ROI will be pretty significant. One of the other things that we have seen from leveraging ABM, because we're being more strategic about which accounts we're going after and applying our resources to the accounts that have the highest revenue potential for Timetrade, we've seen a significantly increased average deal size for those accounts. Accounts that fall within this program tend to close at 4 times the value of our traditional ASP outside of that program. So it's been really successful in not only quantity of deals, but also the value of those particular deals as well. So that's what I have, Daniel. I'll hand it over to you to do some questions.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing that story. That is just an incredible what you guys have implemented there at Timetrade. I hope this framework presented by Cheri and SiriusDecisions really helps you guys understand like how you can start to think about your nurture in a different way. And then with Lauren's examples, start to get a little more in the tactical side of things and build some programs together. We do have a few questions, so I'll do a few of them here right now. So the first one is, how are marketers customizing the demand waterfall? That's an obvious one to go right to Cheri at SiriusDecisions, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one we hear pretty frequently when it comes to any of the models or frameworks that SiriusDecisions has. I think most people are on a journey when it comes to transformation, when it comes to implementing the demand waterfall, and they may need additional stages based on a incredibly long buying cycle, for example, or maybe it's more transactional, so we condense down some of the stages. So I think that would be the biggest way that people look to customize. Isn't anything dramatic. It's more about, you know, shrinking and expanding where it's necessary based on what we know about our buyer's journey and the overall sales cycle.
Great, thanks. So another one, this is a really good question. I'm curious to hear both your guys' response on how does your traditional demand programs, lead-based, work with your ABM strategy, or are you integrating them at all? So I think it's kind of geared towards Lauren. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I'd like to hear SiriusDecisions' take as well.
Yeah, I can jump in. So this is Lauren. I think so for us, when you look at the waterfall, we actually measure both, you know, what is, I think, kind of the previous SiriusDecisions waterfall. We use that, and we definitely look at conversion rates from inbound and across kind of the standard way that leads conversion is. But then we also, that doesn't work as well for ABM, which is why, I think they redid it and look at it in this new way. So we also measure specifically to ABM and how those things compare and look at the conversion rates and compare the two. I think you can't ignore inbound, even though outbound, I think it's just about where you focus your time, and you have to, kind of have a mix of both and understand, because if you're only going outbound, you may not even be identifying what are some of the new areas that may be growth opportunities for your company in terms of use cases or personas that you never even thought about addressing.
Totally, and I agree with Lauren. I would say even if your company isn't at a mature stage like Timetrade, where you're actually looking at account-based marketing and all of the interlock and alignment that needs to go into that, even regardless of the mechanism that you're using to track your marketing, chances are if you're in B2B, you're looking at a buying cycle that includes a buying group. So that could be a committee or consensus-based rather than a single person purchase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at leads only is still going to lose sight of the fact that it's a group of people purchasing. So I guess that would be my kind of response to that, is don't feel that it's all or nothing. There are definitely stepping stones to getting to ABM and getting to measurement in a better way too.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. Looking at the leads and what accounts are they already related to, is one of the things that we're working on in PFL, so we can then identify the buying group or who else maybe is expressing interest who was not identified in our outbound programs as well. So we find our demand gen programs in the traditional sense feed into our account-based programs as well. So one more question. What is the right mix or balance between direct mail sends and email? And any recommendations on where we should start in the process?
Well, I would say, I think just across the board, and this is a question that I know I field a lot of questions on, since I cover a lot of different marketing technologies and different kind of delivery mechanisms as well. As unfortunately, there isn't going to be a silver bullet at the end of the day, and it's really about orchestrating that right mix. I think if there was that silver bullet and I could discover it, I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere and would have sold that idea off already. But I think at the end of the day, it's finding that right balance. And a good way to do that is to first start by looking at your personas and making sure that you're actually tailoring each of the programs based on what the persona's needs are and how they actually want to be consuming and getting that access to that content. So we do a lot of research about buyer behavior. So that is a great way to start, is using information like that and then building out your own personas. But then also making sure that your personas aren't sitting on a shelf and getting dusty, that you're actually operationalizing them and keeping them up to date with the information that we're learning through that balance of our mix of tactics, whether that be email, direct mail, paid social, influencer relations, anything like that.
Yeah. I like to think of it in just a little different words than what you use there, in terms of like, what's the relationship I have from a marketing perspective, and that's really measured by the engagement with the prospect on when and where, what channels I should use. If someone is engaging well with email and they're with the content, then by all means send them more email. But if they're sending you signals that they aren't engaging, or you have not established any relationship with them, you might consider a different channel to just get that exposure. And by different channels, direct mail is one, but also trade shows, even display ads can be less intrusive. And I think Lauren did a good job with that in their programs, and sort of warming prospects up, so to speak, early on with display ads and LinkedIn ads, so at least they're familiar with what the brand of Timetrade before doing a higher touch or more push tactic on that account or prospect. Well, that wraps up the questions I have we have time for right now. If you have more questions, please do submit them, and we can filter them to the appropriate person to get a response, or reach out to any of us directly. We'd be more than happy to help you along building a modern nurture stream. Thanks so much to Lauren and Cheri for this great presentation. I hope you guys all found it as valuable as I did.